How is it rocking, Dwayne Nation? Stay here because we are just about to get underway. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. We put out weekly sports content, and we want to continue to build up Dwayne Nation and the brand that is Dwayne Sports. Thank you all, and enjoy. Welcome in, Dwayne Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo, and Week 1 is in the books as of this recording. Monday night has just finished. We got to see the whole slate of games from this weekend. It is so good to be back, man. It was great. A lot of sloppy football, but it's football indeed, and it was just so exciting. How'd you feel about this weekend, Genoa?
Justin, man, what a strange week it was in the NFL. But it just felt like week 1, Justin. If you've watched the NFL, I've watched it for about 10 plus years now. Week 1 is always that odd week, that weird week. I mean, it's just, there's always 1 to 2 to 3 games every year, Justin, that are just so odd, so weird. But first, I just want to say, yo, Dewey Nation, what's up? Week 1 is in the books. We're excited that we get to talk about it. Maybe a little bit of waiver wires in another video, and then we'll be on to week 2. But for now, I'm so excited to recap week 1. Justin, doing sports, we're taking off, and I'm excited to get this thing going.
Yeah, man, I can't wait to recap every game from this past weekend. Tonight's game, obviously Sundays, Fridays, and Thursday. We're gonna have all of it. We're gonna go game by game, so we'll include injuries that have happened, or just our outlook of how next week's and the weeks following will look, and what week 1 is telling us. So we're gonna start all the way back Thursday night. The AFC Championship rematch, a very interesting game, goes to the the very end of the game by an inch. By an inch, we saw maybe an overtime game for the first game of the season. It did not happen, but there's a lot to take away. And I think the biggest storyline of it is Isaiah Likely from the Baltimore Ravens. Goes for over 100 yards, I believe 9 catches and a score, almost had a second one with that final, scoring touchdown, and clearly is going to be a guy in this offense. Mark Andrews, yes, it was a slow game. I'm not crazy worried, maybe just a little bit. There's a reason to worry because I think Likely's about to step up and go bat for bat with Mark Andrews this season. But I think they both can coexist. What do you think about Likely?
Yeah, I first of all, Likely had a fantastic game. He's kind of carried this from the back part of last season. I know Mark Andrews missed the rest of the last season. He did come back, I believe, for the AFC Championship game against these very same Chiefs. But ever since Mark Andrews tore his fibula last year, Likely has become the alpha there. And I don't know if that fibula injury last year is slowing Mark Andrews down little by little, and Likely is just eyeing that number 1 tight end spot. But that is definitely something to look into next week when they're home against the Vegas Raiders, Justin. Likely could be in for another big game. And this is something to definitely look at. I don't think this is like a 1-week wonder kind of thing for the fantasy world. I think this might be kind of something that is going to happen now because Lamar doesn't really have much wide receivers. We saw that in the game. The only really effective wide receiver was Zay Flowers, and outside of that one big play, I think out of Bateman late in that drive. So this is definitely something to look at, Justin. And so, hey, the Ravens, they're going to need to find some other people to get Lamar Jackson, some plays.
Yeah, but I think, like as you mentioned, Likely's here to stay. He's a must grab off the waiver wire. We know how early season waiver wires can be league changing. Kyron was a big one last year. Puka Nacua. So Likely, although tight end, in the grand scheme of tight ends, he dominated. He was clearly the tight end 1. Over double digits, he passed tight end 2 on the week, which was Foster Moreau. Just goes to show how porous the tight end position was this week. Obviously, I expect a lot of bounce backs in the next following weeks. Through the rest of the players in this game, Lamar Jackson had a really good game, a quarterback 3 performance. Derrick Henry and Pacheco, kind of similar games, a touchdown, some yards on the ground. I think that those are kind of floor games, though. I expect it to be around there and maybe a little bit better going forward. Flowers was fine, and then on the flip side, 2 very noteworthy players had very good games: Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Rashee Rice is going to be a top 15 wide receiver this year. no doubt about it. I mean, he was that guy already being deemed the slant king, like Michael Thomas was a handful of years ago, which is a nice crown to have. And then Worthy, although he didn't get a ton of touches, puts up 2 scores. And I think I think you drafted him in our big league. Be happy you got Worthy. He's going to be a great play, I think, down the stretch. He will have some cold games, but I think it's only going up for Worthy. What do you think?
No, he's going to be getting a lot of touches there, Justin. We don't know how long Hollywood Brown's going to be. I think he's out for another couple weeks. And this is their guy that they drafted real high. And even before Xavier Worthy got drafted, I think it was him or Adonai Mitchell that was just saying, "Hey, the Chiefs can come get me. I'm their missing piece. I'm their next Tyreek Hill." And man, Justin, did he ever prove it on his first game? And it's more impressive coming on a Thursday night game, Justin, because if it was
Right.
just a typical Sunday afternoon game, then it would be cool. But the fact that he did this on a Thursday night game, where it's tough to kind of break that sweat that first week around, and I mean he got a touchdown out of the ground game, he got a touchdown receiving, he was all open for his receiving touchdown, and I mean it was just a beautiful sight to see. Patrick Mahomes now has an potential number one wide receiver, and to go along with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. So expect Worthy to be great all year round. He's going to be one of those rookies that when we're looking at fantasy points, Justin, he's probably going to be leading all rookies in fantasy points. Maybe not the quarterback position,
Right.
but I guess the skill position players, he definitely will be.
Yeah, and with some poor performances that we'll talk about later, he leads, the headlines of rookie wide receivers, especially this week.
Mm-hmm.
Wrapping up the game, though, Mahomes, even though we saw good games from wide receivers, it wasn't a great fantasy output for him. I expect some games to be that way, but I also expect more Mahomes and more Kelce going forward. Moving to the Friday game, very fun game, although sloppy in the beginning. Packers and the Eagles. Eagles get the victory 34-29. We see Saquon Barkley's debut, and it is otherworldly. He goes as the running back 1 on the week. 3 scores. 1 was a receiving, 2 rushing, got over 100 yards on the ground. He's set up to be a top 3 running back. If I already the draft looking at it, I would have him over Breece Hall and Bijan. I think he's right there. I think we overlooked it more than we thought. I know this sounds like maybe an overreaction because it's 1 week, but McCaffrey left a porous team, went to a team that had, great O-line, a great offense, and it was by far the RB1 was, lighting up the scoreboard. I think Saquon's in line to do so. Looking at the rest of them before I jump to you, obviously Hurts had a so-so game, 1 really bad interception. He was all right. He had some good plays. A.J. Brown had a big touchdown. I was impressed to see Devonta Smith, what he was able to do, 7 catches, 84 yards. Although not a, huge game because of no touchdowns, no 100 yards. He was in the slot. He was getting utilized. And then on the flip side, hopefully Jordan Love is, he's got that 3 to 6 week tag now with the MCL. There is worry there for all of the Packers offense in the meantime with Malik Willis. But what are your thoughts on this game and the outlook for the Packers?
Yeah, so this game was actually fun to watch than the scoreboard kind of shows it. I did like kind of the back and forth there kind of at the end of the second half. Justin, we had a last minute draft that you and I were in on Thursday night. And I was with the 4th pick. I said, you know what? I'm going to go and take Saquon Barkley. And man, oh man, I'm glad I am that I have Saquon in 1 league at least out of my 4 leagues. And this guy's going to be a guy that, he's going to be a awesome daily fantasy kind of guy. A guy that can build your weekend matchups. I know next week you probably won't be able to if you're doing Sunday slates because they do play on Monday night. But that matchup home against Atlanta next week is another tasty matchup there for all Saquon Barkley owners. Looking into Jalen Hurts, I mentioned, how much I love Jalen Hurts. He did have a kind of weird first half. I'm not sure if he was just trying to get into the slump with it. A slump. I just don't know if he was in a slump. I don't know if him, Sirianni, really are falling out in front of our eyes as we know it before the season. We even get to week 4 or 5. Hopefully they can fix things there because there were some things the passing game that just didn't seem very Jalen Hurts. I didn't see him do much rushing. And Justin, one thing I noticed, the tush push was stopped twice.
Yeah.
And one of the times it was a no-brainer that it was not a first down. I mean, Jalen Hurts got completely clocked on one of the tush push attempts. So that's something that they're going to need to fix. I'm not sure if that field in Brazil was all well because, Jordan Love is hurt. It sucks to see that just because they were able to put 29 points on the board. And so we're hoping Jordan Love can get back soon. As far as the Packers pass catchers, I mean, it looks like Malik Willis, a guy that they just traded, is going to be the guy that's going to be starting for them until Jordan Love comes back. I mean, home against Indianapolis next week. I mean, I like the Colts defense a lot. And so I'm not really liking that matchup. If there's some rookies out there that you have, I'd start them. Like we mentioned, Worthy. If there's a Brian Thomas, obviously you're starting Neighbors. If you had Ladd McConkey, Justin, who scored a touchdown, I'd start him over any Packers pass catcher, even though Jaden Reed had a great game in fantasy, had about almost 35 points. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to step back a little bit on the Packers playmakers this upcoming week just to see what they do. And then maybe week 3 we can revisit it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Hopefully, there's going to be a lot of Jacobs, even though I think the offense is going to struggle.
Yeah.
Moving to the next game, the Sunday slate. Well, there's a handful of these games on Sunday that there's not a lot to talk about. A lot of defensive carrying games, and it starts with this one. We had Pittsburgh at Atlanta. Pittsburgh gets the victory on the road. The real standout is just TJ Watt, not fantasy related, but TJ Watt was everywhere in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Some takeaways, though. Kirk Cousins looked bad. He looked very bad. 2 bad interceptions, and it hurt Drake London. Drake London stopped 2 catches. Pitts had a touchdown, but otherwise was ineffective. Bijan Robinson did look good and he got 90% of the touches. So hopefully we're looking at a Bijan, solely backfield. I know Algier will get his touches here and there, but happy to see that Bijan was that guy, and he looked very good. And then the flip side, it was Pickens. Pickens was playing very well, getting a lot of big catches. And Freiermuth was a guy that was kind of a security blanket for Fields, even though Fields' passing was, as per assumed, not great. So there's some worries there. Maybe we'll see Russell Wilson next week, but Fields is fine. They get the victory, but not too much to take from it. Do you have any takeaways?
Yeah, I just feel like they should just name Fields the starter all year. You're 1-0 right now, right? Russell Wilson has some type of injury that's going to be lingering all year. He's up there in age. I just don't feel it's fair to the Steelers team, especially that great defense, to just keep playing patty cake and back and forth on who's going to be quarterback. I think you stick with Fields. He's the younger guy. They didn't really prep him that much the past couple weeks to be the starter. It was Russell, and he was still able to go out there and win the game on the road, Justin. So
Yeah.
I say going forward with the Steelers, just keep Fields in. He's the younger guy. He was great in Chicago. Obviously we'll talk about the Bears game in a little bit. Maybe he was missed over there this past weekend, even though they got the victory. But Justin Fields, I'm still a believer in this guy. I mean, he's on a great offense. He wasn't really named the starter going to this week, and they went into Atlanta and beat them. And it was a pretty, even though defense was able to lock it down, Justin Fields did enough to win that game. And so I say go forward there with Justin Fields in Pittsburgh as the starting quarterback. He's younger, faster. He has a chip on his shoulder. I think he works well with Mike Tomlin in that offense compared to Russell. Use Russell as trade bait. Send him to New York. Send him to Minnesota. Send him to
Cleveland, maybe.
Cleveland, maybe. But but in the Falcons side, to wrap this one game up, I would say that Kirk Cousins looked awful. If this is a reoccurring thing the next 1 to 2 weeks, I'd say it's time to start looking left into that guy you drafted in the first round in the top in that lottery. That guy out of Washington State, who we like as a pocket passer, get the ball to guys like Kyle Pitts and Drake London there. So let's see what happens next week in Philly. It seems like Kirk Cousins is always playing week 2 in Philly on some type of primetime game. I know there's at least 3 times, but he's struggling in Philly. So he doesn't have Justin Jefferson this time around. He doesn't have Kevin O'Connell's pretty good offense there. So, he does have Bijan, and so he's going to need to utilize those weapons there in Philly next week.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how they do. That there is some worry there because he looked really bad and uncomfortable. I know he was getting pressured a lot, but yeah. Moving to the next game, we have the Arizona Cardinals versus Buffalo, and for a good chunk of that, I thought I was going to have the upset of the week alert because I had Cardinals winning in our score predictions. They were doing well. They fell off. It was a surprise because they had Connor rolling in the first half. Kyler was doing some good things, darting up Greg Dortch more than we thought. But the takeaway is Kyler didn't end up having a very great game, even though he rushed for 50-something yards. Marvin Harrison, obviously 1 catch, not a great game, but don't be too scared. I think he will bounce back. Trey McBride, only 5 catches for 30 yards. I think he's the one who I am most secure about in the next few weeks. I think he will improve. Had 9 targets. So Kyler was looking his way, just didn't work out. And then on Buffalo, Josh Allen, quarterback, he was the quarterback 2 on the week, but he was balling. I mean, he was doing everything for Buffalo. James Cook had a fine game, but nothing crazy. But Josh Allen kind of is the only guy out of Buffalo that was really impressive. And then, of course, Don Kincaid had a nothing game. So what do you think, though, with these out performances?
So Justin, going for it. I mean, Josh Allen, he's going to be that guy, and this Thursday they're playing Miami. That's going to be another shootout. This is every game this season for Buffalo. It's going to be relying on Josh Allen. There's going to be a pattern where there's not going to be too much of James Cook. It's just going to be through the hands and legs of Josh Allen. He is now a favorite, in my opinion, after 1 week to be the MVP because there's no dominant alpha there as at the skill playmaking positions there in Buffalo. So this is going to be a reoccurring thing every week for Buffalo. It's going to be through all Josh Allen. The running game's still probably going to be there, but I mean, Josh Allen is going to be the guy, no doubt there. Looking on the Arizona side, Justin, I had them getting blown out. I think my prediction was 38-13.
Yeah.
But they impressed me, Justin. And you know what? They have a game at home this upcoming week against the Los Angeles Rams, who also just lost. So if you're, fantasy owners out there are a little bit, down on Marvin Harrison, this is not the same guy we saw at Ohio State, or Kyler Murray, who here at Doing Sports we actually love here to have a good fantasy season. I am actually gonna say that this is their worst game out of the season because next week, hey, they play the Rams at home, and that's gonna be a shootout, Justin. You cannot sit here and tell me that's not gonna be a shootout there. And that next week they're gonna be home with Detroit Lions, week 3. That's gonna be another shootout at home. So 2 home games against 2, really good offenses. So not to worry about Marvin Harrison. Honestly, it's always a tough matchup, Justin, with a young offense and a young coach starting the season off in Buffalo in that ruckus environment. So it's one of those games that you just brush off and get ready to go into week 2. So I'm not too worried about the Cardinals at all.
And, they even had a shot to win the game. The last drive, they go 4 downs and then get the turnover on down. So Cardinals, you're giving some hope that I enjoy.
Yeah.
So that's good. Moving to the next game, we got the Tennessee Titans at the Chicago Bears, in a game that Chicago won somehow on the backs clearly of the Chicago Bears defense, having 2 touchdowns. If you had them in your fantasy lineups, you were very happy. But the offense for Chicago was pretty much a no-show. Only 93 passing yards from Caleb Williams. Yeah, I think 5 points for DeAndre Swift. Keenan Allen gets injured. Rome Odunze gets injured. DJ Moore had 5 catches as well for 36 yards, I believe.
Yeah.
It was a pretty ugly game against a defense that we thought would be kind of under average. So it's a first game. Caleb Williams obviously should go, up in the upwards direction over the next month or so. But there definitely was it was definitely a bad game for the Bears. And as for the Titans, the thing that most interesting story we got there was Tony Pollard was the clear RB1. We didn't see as much Tajay as we thought we would. And Will Levis is pretty bad. That was pretty, at least that, especially that last drive with the interception. So there's some causes for concern. It could just be that the Bears are a really good defense now, or Tennessee is in trouble.
Justin, just a lot of things to take away. First of all, the Titans were really controlling the ball. They had an 8-minute drive in the second quarter.
Wow.
And the fact that they weren't able to win this game and do it, replicate that same drive in the third quarter, they were just turning over. Obviously, they had a block punt to start that fiasco. Just the Titans, the Titans. We didn't expect much from them. Looking at the Bears side, I just want to say how awful Swift looked. I watched most of that game along with my Texans game. I was watching the Bears game because I was so interested to see what Caleb was going to do. Swift just looked awful. It just did not look like the Swift in Detroit. Did not look like the Swift that we saw last year in Philadelphia. And it's a little bit of concern there with their offense going on the road next week to Houston. There's some things that they need because the Texans are going to give up points like that, what the Titans did. It's not going to be a thing. I don't think CJ Stroud's going to play really good, clean football. He's not going to give up that much. So the Bears are going to have to figure out how to score points offensively. The only thing they scored offensively was a 2-point conversion, I believe. And Caleb Williams, I think he was thinking that he was still in college, and I think he was still playing. Think he was still playing for Lincoln Riley, because there were some plays there where he was just flinching and running out of the pocket when he shouldn't have been. A lot of running out of the pocket as soon as he took the snap, when there wasn't even pressure in that direction. So I think it was just a rookie quarterback making rookie mistakes there. Thankfully, he didn't turn the ball over too much. He had some good rushing plays. But other than that, Chicago's definitely going to have to clean it up. They want to beat Houston next week on the road.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about it more in the offseason. I think we both kind of were rising on the Bears offense, but we were really low on Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator, and this offensive scheme. And in week 1, it didn't prove to be very, strong. So we'll see if there's improvements. Obviously, it's Caleb Williams' first game, but it wasn't pretty. So moving to the next game, New England at Cincinnati, another very unpretty game. Cincinnati, wow, Joe Burrow without T. Higgins. It was ugly. The only takeaway, the only positive takeaway I had in this game, Ramondre Stevenson of the Patriots had a phenomenal game. Brother had 25 carries, was doing everything for New England, put up 120 and a score, had 3 catches as well. Top 5 RB on the week. I think that's kind of how New England's going to run their offense. If they can stay in those close possession games like they did this weekend, Ramondre is going to be a good guy to have in fantasy. On the flip side, though, there's not a lot I think I can take away from Cincinnati. They're always slow in the early weeks, so maybe you can be like, it's just like another, every other season that's how they start. But it just looked bad, and I'm a little concerned.
Justin, boy, I don't even know where to start here on the Bengals. This is very concerning to lose to Jacoby Brissett at home against a rookie head coach making his debut on the road. I mean, Justin, they drafted a quarterback in the first round and didn't even look his way to start him. I mean, obviously, Jacoby Brissett's been in the league for about 10 years now, but come on now, Justin. This is the game that you have to win. And it doesn't matter that you didn't have T. Higgins. There's no excuses there. Joe Burrow, he has to prove that he's that guy. And I think there's some reports out there that Jamar Chase was actually battling an illness. So maybe that's probably the reason why he didn't perform as well. But, I mean, come on, guys. I mean, you guys are both – I mean, Jamar's asking for a contract, and I know he probably doesn't want to play under, but, I mean, this is a season that you guys have to really make it or break it before – I mean, Justin, next week they go to Kansas City. So it's very concerning to only score 10 points. Now, if the Bengals would have lost 27-30, maybe I'd have just concerns for the defense and be optimistic. But, Justin, the fact that they only scored 10 points – and look, I know last year, if you want to look at last year, I think the Bengals lost really bad to Cleveland, but Cleveland ended up going to the playoffs and being a really good team. And, Deshaun Watson and ended up turning into Joe Flacco. And they're still a great team. So I guess that we don't hold that back. But, I mean, the Patriots, I mean, come on. And you definitely is this is the biggest upset of week 1, no doubt about it. Because T. Higgins or not, Justin, there's no excuses. The Bengals should have won this game.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes for them down the stretch. As you mentioned, they go into Kansas City next week, right? That's going to be a scary matchup for them.
Yeah.
And this year is, to me, make it or break it, because they got to pay Jamar Chase, maybe T. Higgins. He's probably gone.
He's gone.
Maybe, I mean, I've been high on Joe Burrow, since he got into the NFL and had that great, Super Bowl run that, they went all the way there. But it hasn't been pretty other than that, 1 year, maybe 2 years. So we could be having a new look on what Cincinnati really is. We'll see if they put up a good fight next week. But yeah, as for New England, actually, the last thing I want to put up there, they could go 2-0 because they play home against Seattle next week, and Seattle didn't look pretty. So, my dark horse from worst to first last year, I said it was New England. So we'll see. Gerard Mayo, hey, it'll probably all be ugly victories, but if they keep winning, we'll see. So moving into the next game, probably my favorite game of the week, not because I'm a homer, but it's because it was a tight one all the way throughout. It was the Texans winning against the Colts 29-27. We saw the 2 new members of the Texans be the heroes of this game. Joe Mixon 159 on the ground and a score. Stephon Diggs got 2 touchdowns. CJ Stroud looked great, was playing very well, except a couple slips on the ground on this new turf supposedly made of coconut rusk. And that's what Pat McAfee said. Yeah, confusing me too.
Yeah,
We didn't see big games from Tank Dell. Nico Collins had a fine game. Some really key plays that you might not see, based on just his stats, but he had some huge plays for the Texans. On the Colts side, this is what AR didn't look wonderful. I mean, he had 3 long balls that hit, and that was phenomenal. It wasn't super pretty, but still a top 4 quarterback on the week, and he only completed 9 passes. AR is to me in line for even bigger season than we might be expecting. I mean, he was awesome. This game was amazing. Texans Colts are going to be a rivalry for the next decade.
absolutely.
JT was fine on the ground. The Texans locked him up pretty well. He didn't get all the touches in the world. I think it's because it was just so tight. But what a game! What do you think?
Justin, this was definitely my favorite game of the weekend. I am a Texans fan. I am very, very happy we came away with the victory. But I got to say, this is just tons of takeaways here. First, let me get into AR. He is going to be a problem. He is going to be a problem. I like him next week in Green Bay on the road to have a phenomenal game and lead them to their first victory of the season. He impressed me. This is going to be a guy in a division that's going to be a threat to my Houston Texans year in and year out. And you mentioned it. This is going to be a rivalry for the next decade. I do think the Colts are going to be able to beat the Titans twice and the Jaguars twice. It's going to be between them and us. It's going to be a battle year in and year out. And this is going to be exciting football. I mean, this is going to be AFC Championship rivalries. I mean, the winner of this is going to have a spot in the Super Bowl. And AR is going to be that guy going into next year, Justin. God forbid he has no injuries this year. If he's healthy at the end of this year, going into next year, he is going to be quarterback that in fantasy drafts you're looking at in the 4th or 5th round, a top 5 quarterback. He might be drafted over Jordan Love next year, for sure over like Burrow. So I'm loving what I'm seeing out of AR. If they get a good tight end, Justin, like a Schultz or someone, a TJ Hawkinson, or just someone of that aspect. I mean, look out for the Colts. Look out. They have the running back. They have the receivers to do it. The coaching for sure, and the defense is stout. Going over to my Houston Texans, I loved what I saw out of CJ Stroud all game. He was so poised out of the pocket. He slipped a couple times, but still was able to make completions. I mean, CJ Stroud has given my Houston Texans so much life, has given us so much promise that we can make a run to the Super Bowl, and it all goes through him. He is the guy. He is a top 5 to 6 quarterback. He put this team on his back, and he made plays when he was needed to. At the end of that drive to convert, made that play to Nico Collins, and then at the end, Joe Mixon, as you mentioned, was able to get that first down and kind of ice the game. This is a great game for my Houston Texans. I hope this is set the tone all year. I hope one of the best teams in the league. I hope we can make a run. Our new playmakers helped us win this game. Now let's hope our old playmakers can win as others. So I just hope that we're able to balance it out this whole year. Diggs one game, Tank another, Nico Collins, Schultz. So I'm really happy to be a Texans fan. I'm hoping we're going out there and winning every game. We have a tough one to Chicago. I know on paper it's not so tough, but it's going to be a tough one. We're still a young team, very, very young team. So I'm very excited, though, as a Texans fan.
Yeah, it was great, and only good things ahead for both squads in this game. Moving to the next game, Jacksonville at Miami, a close game. Jacksonville also is a team that had it. These two, Tennessee and Jacksonville, are 2 teams that had the victories in their hands, and they fumbled it. For Jacksonville, they literally fumbled it. Travis Etienne fumbled at the goal line. That was pretty ugly. To me, Miami didn't convincingly win this game for me. Obviously, they had the huge play with Tyreek Hill for 80 yards. So and that was their big, play there. I think the storyline that was most interesting was Devon Achane getting a ton of catches, which is super great for his fantasy value. He was super involved. On the flip side, Raheem Mostert was barely involved. Not much efficiency on the ground. Even Jeff Wilson got in for some touches. Jalen Ryan didn't play, actually, but Mostert was the letdown spot this week. I thought he was going to play well, so that was one of my misses for this week. And then on the other side, Brian Thomas got a touchdown going against Jalen Ramsey. He fared pretty well, and I was pretty impressed at what he was able to do. The rest of the pass catchers were bust on the week. Evan Ingram only had one catch. Christian Kirk didn't do much. Trevor Lawrence didn't do much. So Jacksonville wasn't pretty just about all around. Besides Thomas and Etienne did get in the end zone. And then on Miami's side, there's some worry because I didn't think Tua looked that great again. But, this week they got a quick matchup, on Thursday night. So it might be another sloppy one, but I think it'll be a close one. But yeah, Miami gets the victory. What do you think?
Yeah, just I was a little bit surprised that the Dolphins weren't able to put up a 30, 35 points on the board. It was a little concerning when third quarter and they're down by 10. But I think they're going to be a great team this year. I do have the Dolphins winning it. They look more, there's something different about the Dolphins this year, Justin, than in previous years under Mike McDaniels in the Tua era. There's something different about it. And I like it, Justin. I feel like their offense looks just more balanced. I don't know if it's that A-chain, the emergence of A-chain. They have multiple running backs there. You mentioned Jeff Wilson played and Jalen Wright didn't. So they're stacked at the running back. So I think that helps their offense a lot. I know Jonnu Smith didn't have too much of a crazy game. But I just feel like this offense is a little bit more balanced. It's going to help Tua in key situations. And their defense looked pretty good, Justin. They were able to lock them down in the last quarter. And so it's, going to the Jacksonville side, Justin, as the years go on, I'm starting to think that Trevor Lawrence was just hype coming out of Clemson as the number one pick overall. And he has just not shown, he's just not had a wow game. I think the last time I saw Trevor Lawrence had a really good game was 2 years ago at home against the Dallas Cowboys where they had a big comeback. But that's really the last time. And obviously they had that big comeback a couple years ago in the wild card against the Chargers. But other than that, Justin, it feels like that Jacksonville was content with that playoff run, losing to Kansas City that divisional round that year, and they haven't they're not able to put points. They have pretty good playmakers. I'm not sure why it's not been able to work. If the Saints if the Buccaneers, right, they have Mike Evans and a couple good playmakers. If that team is able to put points week in and week out, I do not understand why Trevor Lawrence, who was great in college, with Travis Etienne right next to him, they played together in college. Evan Ingram, who's a great tight end. You mentioned he was one of the highest scoring tight ends last year in fantasy. Christian Kirk is pretty good. Gabe Davis is pretty good. And the rookie, I just don't understand how they were only able to score 17. It's very concerning. Jacksonville is looking to be on the decline. And as much as I love myself some Dougie P, he's a legend in the city of Philadelphia. I think his job is on the line. And it's very concerning if you're a Jags fan.
Yeah, we'll see if they can bounce back next week. But a team that looked really awful this week is looking at this next game, Panthers at Saints. This game was over by the end of the first quarter. I mean, Saints jumped to a 30-0 lead by halftime. Wow, just wow. Because I picked New Orleans to win, but I thought it was gonna be a close one. I thought it was gonna be ugly. I thought there would be some fight from Carolina, but there was absolutely nothing. Kamara had a good game. Surprisingly, Olave did not have a good game, which has me worried because in a game where you put up 47 and you do nothing, there's something missing there. Derek Carr surprised. I don't think I'm rushing to the waiver wire to pick him up or anything like that though. But Carolina, big letdown spot. Nobody really performed well on that side, so there's definitely concern there.
Yeah, Justin, I picked Carolina to win. And man, have I ever been so wrong. I mean, I'm watching this game, I'm watching the Texans game, and I'm watching Red Zone, and I'm seeing Bryce Young turning over every drive. I mean, Justin, it's a little concerning now. I don't want to call Bryce Young a bust, but Justin, come on, year two, you need to start off week one with a bang with your new coaching staff, who we've mentioned Dave Canales more than anybody in doing sports history. The fact that you go out there and just only put 10 points, I mean, it's just unbelievably devastating and disappointing there in Carolina. They are home next week with the Chargers, who are going to be a tough team this year. But I want to see what the Saints do next week in Dallas. That's going to be a true test to see are the Saints really that good or are the Panthers really that bad. Just not much to say for either team here. One, I'm very disappointed, and one, I'm just, actually pretty happy that they were able to perform at a high level. Derek Carr looked unbelievable there. I want to give a shout out to Foster Moreau, who you mentioned earlier in this episode. He was battling cancer a year or two ago, I believe. So it's I'm really glad to see Foster Moreau back there scoring a touchdown and continue being in the NFL.
Yeah, no, that was great to see.
Mm-hmm.
Also the kicker for the Saints had what 5 field goals, very impressive game. The Saints, wow, I mean, surprise, surprise. We'll see how they can continue, or if they can continue that success. Moving on to the next game, from week 1, we have the Vikings at Giants, and a game where Vikings, another team where they were in control the whole game. There was no doubt from pretty early on. Malik Neighbors gets his targets. Doesn't have a huge game or anything like that. It's a fine game. Justin Jefferson scores, but other than that, pretty much a non-factor. Aaron Jones doesn't do too much either. So it was the Vikings defense that was the bright spot from this football game. Other than that, nothing too crazy. Besides, there was a Jordan Addison. He gets injured in this game. Will be out for at least a couple of weeks. So looking at the fantasy turnout of that, that's just more Justin Jefferson. And maybe a guy who scored a touchdown. I believe his last name's Naylor. He
Jalen
did
Naylor.
get a touchdown on a broken play. So we'll see. Aaron Jones had a very solid game. They do play San Francisco next week, who just kind of beat the snot out of the Jets for most of this game. So we'll see how this game for the Vikings, how week 1 and week 2 look. But pretty promising. I thought it was pretty good. As for the Giants, what is to be assumed. I that's kind of what I thought was going to happen. So they're kind of. I think they should be looking for number 1 pick already. Daniel Jones looked really bad, and it affected everybody else. It affected the defense. It affected all the players on the offense. So clear concern for the Giants. They should probably be already looking towards next year, but we'll see how that goes. What did you think?
Justin, I'm convinced that Daniel Jones doesn't like to play football. I mean, there's so many people that believe in him over himself. I mean, when you look at Daniel Jones and his demeanor, he just lacks all the confidence in the world. I mean, it's almost as the New York Giants are like, "We believe in you, we believe in you," and he's like, "Me? You really believe in me? You really think I'm that good?" It's just this vibe that he just does not believe in himself. He has no drive, he's not enthusiastic at all about football. It's just like, dude, do you even want to be here? I mean, there's just a lot of questions about Daniel Jones. I mean, really, I really want to find somebody that believes in me as much as the Giants believe in Daniel Jones. I mean, this guy has no confidence. It's just sad. It is just sad and despicable at this point. I mean, whoever the Giants are playing now, Justin, I think they play Washington next week.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm starting Washington defense just because of what they did and their
Right.
defense and their outing. But I mean, Justin, this guy, I just, if I'm the Giants and I want any chance to play, you got to put in Tommy DeVito. The story of the back half of last season, the DeVito, the DeVito, just put him in. I mean, at least it'll put some spark to your team, some interest. At least everybody in New York embrace him like a son because he has that tradition, that last name. He has that New York kind of authenticity. He has that New York. He has that New York vibe to him, Justin. So
I get you.
if I'm the Giants, just go with him and don't look back because Daniel Jones is awful. And good game from the Vikings, I guess.
Yeah, nothing, not a lot of good news from this game. Moving to the next game, we had a pretty good one. I'm trying to get the list out here. We had to me, is somewhat of a shocker. We saw J.K. Dobbins have a revitalization. Over 100 yards, 135 yards on 10 carries. He gets a touchdown, and the Chargers get a victory at home. You had the Chargers, so you were right on this one. I actually had the Raiders. I thought there would be some sort of I just thought it would be a different game. I thought the Raiders would come ready with Antonio Pierce, but they clearly were not. And Jim Harbaugh and company played a very good game. They were very run heavy, and it worked out for them. And honestly, that I'm very interested on what J.K. Dobbins could be down the line. He had a great game. I'm actually going to start him in our big league next week. I'm pretty confident in that already. He looked very good. He sold me on it, even though him and Gus Edwards still had equal opportunities. He definitely looked like the more explosive back, had 2 really big runs along with a touchdown. And also on the Chargers, Lad McConkey gets in the end zone, looks very good. in his debut. And then on the flip side, the Raiders, it was ugly. Bad game from Zamir White. Alex Madison is actually the leader of that running back room in week 1. Devontae Adams, a very meddling game, and that's about it. That I think Jacoby Myers had a fine. He had 8 points. Nothing crazy. So the Raiders underwhelm, and I think that might be the story to tell going forward. They might need this defense to try to carry them a lot, but the biggest storyline is the Chargers. They look good. I think they're going to win a lot of low scoring, somewhat boring games, but they're going to win these games.
Yeah, I like what I saw in the Chargers. Nothing much to say there. Jim Harbaugh historically has always had a great defense. I think the Harbaugh whole family, they just know how to coach defense. I think they come from that Rex Ryan, Buddy Ryan kind of tree there, back in those early Baltimore days. I know Jim Harbaugh, he had his own thing going on in San Francisco with a great handful of players: Justin Smith, Alden Smith there, Navarro Bowman, if you remember him, Patrick Willis. So he's always had great defensive players there. Just with the Raiders, man, you guys, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where it's kind of what you get. You didn't pursue a quarterback in the offseason. You didn't really go after Kirk or make a trade for Russell Wilson or, I mean, even a guy like Joe Milton that got drafted for the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots have 3 quarterbacks that could all be playable, and it's the Raiders didn't even try. I mean, at least get someone. I mean, out of all the they didn't really get a quarterback in the. They're just content with O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, and Justin. Honestly, that's what they get. And honestly, I hope that teams can now look after what the Raiders. And if you have a guy that's Devontae Adams, they at the wide receiver position. You have Jacoby Myers had a great season. You have upcoming tight end Brock Bowers. I know they drafted him in the first round, but for God's sake, man, you guys should have got a quarterback. And that's what you get. I hope you guys go 0-17, and every team should look after that, to study them. And hey, we're going to go for a quarterback because 10 points is unbelievable. And I know Jim Harbaugh has been a while since he's been in the NFL, but my God, you guys have Devontae Adams and Zamir White and Antonio Cruz I'm a believer in. Minshew's just not going to do it. He's not going to cut it. I mean, we've seen Minshew Mania over and over and over again. It's just the same rom-com, chick flick that you know what's going to happen at the end. It's just it's the fantasy, the Cinderella story. It's over with Minshew. It was cool. It's cute in Jacksonville. But, I mean, after it being in Indianapolis and now in Las Vegas, I mean, I would just say go trade for Russell Wilson. I know he's a little dinged up, but I think that's your best shot at winning any football game this year.
Yeah, it was underwhelming. It was underwhelming to say the least. Zamir White, who a lot of people had high hopes for, was really underutilized. And so we'll see if they can bounce back, but I'm not hopeful. Moving to the next game, Denver at Seattle, another weird game. 2 safeties. Denver gets 2 safeties on Seattle. Seattle looked really ugly besides Ken Walker, who actually turned it up in the second half, who was my start of the week. So very happy on that one. We also spoke about how we thought DK Metcalf's going to get locked down. He gets locked down, 3 catches, 29 yards, does nothing. But the weirdest thing, I mean, Seattle looked bad, and it has me worried. I know they get the victory, but I honestly would attribute that to how bad Denver was. Denver didn't take advantage of all the opportunities that Seattle handed to them. And looking at Denver, the running back room was porous. I thought Javonte might have a good game. He did not. 2.8. Jaleel McLaughlin 3.3. Ugly. Bo Nix didn't look wonderful. He had 20. I believe he had 26 completed passes on the week, but only had 138 yards. Ugly. And then the leading fantasy wide receiver for the Broncos is a guy I've never even heard the name of. His name is Devon Vili. Gets 8 catches. Maybe is a deep sleeper. I mean, 8 catches is not bad. I know I never heard of him, so there's already that concern. But Denver looks bad and they lose a close one. But Seattle gets an ugly win. But not even it's not a moral win. I wouldn't be happy as a Seattle fan for pulling out this victory. And now they go into New England next week. I actually have New England as my pick so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the Patriots over the Seahawks next week. Both teams look ugly. I'm honestly not optimistic at all for either of these teams. I just don't think Geno's it. Bo Nix has so much room to improve. He looked pretty good. It's just Sean Payton. He's lost his touch a little bit as an offensive play caller. But both of these teams are going to need time to develop. But Geno Smith is just not the answer going forward. Not much to say about these teams. I don't think either of these teams really make the playoffs, and so it's one of those boring 3 o'clock games that you kind of nap through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
moving, moving to the next game. Cleveland and Dallas have a very interesting game. Dallas beats the brakes off of them, and Cleveland looks pretty bad. I mean, Watson looked awful, and it hurt the rest of the team. I mean, Amari Cooper only had, let me see here, he had only 2 catches for 16 yards. Unfortunately, David Njoku leaves the game with a high ankle sprain. Will probably miss about a month.
Mhm.
So that's not good for Cleveland. Jerome Ford though has a very solid game. He scores a touchdown, gets 6 catches. I think he's the only Brown that I'd be starting in my fantasy lineups heading forward. As for Dallas, I mean, Dak Prescott didn't have a great fantasy output game, but he had a good game. I mean, yeah, 179 and a touchdown, nothing too crazy, but I think it's just the defense carried and was really interesting for Dallas throughout the entire game. Zeke Elliott got in the end zone. Brandon Cooks looked pretty solid, and CeeDee Lamb, although didn't have a great game, he looked good for not having a training camp. But Dallas impresses me more than I thought. I think we both had Cleveland to win this football game. But Dallas shows up in a big way, and then they get to host New Orleans Saints next week. So I think they're off to a really good race as Dak gets, his extension, which we haven't mentioned, over the weekend. I believe it was on Sunday, within a couple
Yeah.
hours of the game starting. Dak gets a 4-year extension. So Dallas locks up their offense for the next handful of years, and they get the big victory on the weekend. What do you think?
Yeah, it was very impressive from the Dallas Cowboys there. I didn't have them winning. Actually, I had what happened to Deshaun Watson. I kind of thought that was going to be the other way around. That was going to happen to Dak Prescott. But hey, the Cowboys defense looks pretty nice now under Mike Zimmer, the new defensive coordinator. I like what they can do now. Next week, they could be one of the starts of the week there because I don't really think Derek Carr is going to be able to replicate what he did that porous Carolina defense. And I do think that now the Cowboys are going to start possibly 2-0. So it's a great start for that direction. They lost Jake Ferguson there, Justin. I think it's an MCL sprain. He's going to be probably out 3 to 6 weeks. Kind of the same, similar to what happened to Jordan Love there in Brazil. And so, Dallas looked very impressive there. The defense looked nice. We saw a classic throwback Zeke touchdown there. And so
Yeah.
I thought we were in 2016. I was like, wait, it's 2024. I had to shake myself real quick. But the Cowboys, they were very impressive defensively. And last thing, it's just Deshaun Watson, man. I don't know what happened with him. I don't know if all the off the field issues kind of caught up to him and he's lost confidence in himself. I don't really like what's going on with Deshaun Watson. He doesn't look the same at all. Amari Cooper, I would have loved to seen him have a revenge game versus his former team, but he was an absolute no factor. He looked awful. I think he dropped the wide open touchdown as well. And so, the Browns are just looking bad. You just mentioned that they lost Njoku now going forward for half the season. They don't really have Chubb. And so, Judy scored a touchdown, which was pretty cool to see because I like Judy coming out of Alabama. But other than that, the Browns look disastrous, and I'm not sure about them this year.
Yeah, with Watson playing so bad at quarterback, I have less hope that they could make a playoff run. I had them making the playoffs in our playoff predictions, but currently rethinking that.
Yeah.
Moving to the last 3 o'clock game, we had Washington at Tampa Bay. And quarterback one season uploading question mark. Baker Mayfield had a wonderful game, 4 touchdowns, 289, gets 2 scores to Mike Evans. Chris Godwin gets involved. Tampa Bay, a sleeper team. I thought with Dave Canales leaving that there would be a lot of question marks on if they could step up and do what they did last year, but they show out. I know it was against a bad defense in Washington, but I love how everybody got involved. Even Rashad White had 6 catches, 13 points, nothing too crazy, but Godwin eight catches for 83 yards to score. Mike Evans obviously got 2 touchdowns. Tampa Bay looks very good. Washington, although they get pretty boat raced. Jaden Daniels 28 points, very solid in his first ever game. He's a quarterback 5 on the week, and I think that only highlights how he's going to have a great season, regardless of what Washington is doing. He's going to have a good year. The funny thing is, the biggest worry out of this, Terry McLaurin no show. Luke McCaffrey actually got more fantasy points than Terry McLaurin did this past week. And I attribute that to Jaden Daniels just running the ball about all the time. I think he had 16 carries on the ground. So Daniels, hopefully they don't do that because that could result in injuries pretty quickly early on for a rookie, rookie running back, rookie quarterback. But even in a tough loss, Jaden Daniels is a good fantasy option. So if you have Jaden Daniels, be happy. I think you got a locked in quarterback one, a top 10 guy. And on the flip side, Baker Mayfield, I don't think this is a flash in the pan. I think they're going to be a really solid team. Obviously, this is going to be one of their best fantasy performances, collectively. But a good game from Tampa.
Yeah, no, I like what I saw out of Tampa. I mean, obviously we love Dave Canales, and he's no longer there, and they were still able to put 37 points. But Justin, we're not. I'm a little surprised that Dan Quinn, who's a defensive-minded guy, he's a new head coach, was unable to stop Baker Mayfield. I mean, look, if anybody knows me, I am not the biggest Baker Mayfield guy, but for this weekend, he shut me up, and I'm going to say Baker Mayfield had a great game, but can't he continue this? Can't he go to? I believe they're going to Detroit next week.
They do. Yes, they go into
They
Detroit.
go to Detroit next week. Can he do this in Detroit? Because I like what I saw out of Detroit's defense, who we're about to talk about here in a second. But looking at Jaden Daniels, it's the typical rookie game. Did pretty good. Did as best as he can. He's learning. Once he gets that check down, develop with Austin Eckler, the running game with B-Rob, and obviously you mentioned Terry McLaurin was a no show there. Pretty much not doing much there. I had him in a DraftKings lineup this week and was very shocked to see him to be a non-factor. Maybe the fact that Jahan Dotson is no longer there, I think it draws all the attention to Terry McLaurin, and so I like them, the whole Washington team, to kind of come back and bounce back next week against the Giants.
Nice. Yeah. I expect something better as well. And I think although the play call, put Jaden Daniels in running the football a lot, I think they'll probably not do that as much. That's a little risky for a rookie guy. So moving to Sunday night's game, an overtime affair. Some tough things come out of that game. Obviously, Puka Nacua leaves injured, is actually put on IR, so he'll miss the next 4 games. If you got an IR slot in your fantasy leagues, put Puka on it. And we'll talk about waivers in our next episode, so stay tuned for that. You might find some replacements for him. And as for the rest of the team, Cooper Kupp, phenomenal. 14 catches, over 100 yards and a score. Great performance from him. He's looking like Cooper Kupp. And if you got him right now, he's looking like an absolute steal. And with Puka injured, he's a top 5 wide receiver, in my opinion. And then on Detroit, they win the game, but Amon-Ra has a bad game. Sam Laporta has a pretty bad game. But the running backs, they split right down the middle. They score essentially the exact same, I believe, like 15 and 15 of your fantasy leagues. I think that's the story that's going to be told. But I think they're both going to be good all season. I think they're going to be very consistent. So I liked what Detroit's running backs did. Kyron Williams got in the end zone, so he was fine. No Blake Corum, barely anything. I think he got 1 touch. It was Ronnie Rivers getting touches as the secondary back for the Rams. So that was a story that I think is going to be interesting to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, Cooper Kupp is a top 5 guy right now. And the running backs for Detroit, those are the 3 guys that I think were the winners of this game. And Amon-Ra is going to step up. So don't worry about him. I know he had a bad game. But yeah, what do you think?
I like what I saw out of both teams, Justin. Both teams impressed me. Both teams prove that they're going to be 2 tough teams to battle against in the NFC. First with the Rams, I know they lost the game, and I know they only scored 20 points, but Stafford still played pretty well for his age. The fact that he's not mobile at all. I mean, I really wanted Stafford to get this one in Detroit. I know he wanted to win this one so bad in Detroit. But man, I just love what I saw out of the offense. You mentioned that Blake Corum only had 1 touch. I think it was Chris Collinsworth that mentioned, or Mike Tirico, that he's the future at the running back position. So maybe they don't want to rush it too quick. So maybe we're looking at week 4 to 5 where we start getting 5 touches, 10, 15, possibly 20 for Blake Corum. I know he's so great at the University of Michigan. So for the Lions there, they also look great. Defensively, they look great, man. Aiden Hutchinson, there's going to be a defensive player of the year candidate. Not probably not this year, but definitely in the future, the next couple years to show. And I think the Lions can become a really nasty defense. They're just lacking a linebacker or two, another safety, and man, they're going to be a defense to be reckoned with there. Jared Goff played a pretty decent game. I know he had a turnover late in the fourth quarter. Amon-Ra St. Brown was not targeted much in this game, was not looked at much in this game, was a little surprising. Laporta had some catches here and there, but it was just a ground and pound game. There was Jahmyr Gibbs in a lot of drives as well as Montgomery. They're able to run the ball real well up through the tackles that no longer Aaron Donald used to rule that area. And so both teams are going to be so phenomenal to watch this year. I love what I saw out of the Rams. I do think Stafford has a bounce back game next week in Arizona. So definitely love both teams here. Very impressed with both of them. I didn't even feel like the Rams really lost it. They pushed it to overtime and they didn't really get the ball in overtime. So like both teams this year. Very impressed with both teams. Sean McVay definitely. I know they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago, but without Aaron Donald, this is one of Sean McVay's best teams. I think it's going to be a very fun team to watch this year, especially when Puka comes back.
Yeah, we'll see how they look without Puka. I mean, they look pretty darn good, I think, without him. Over the back half of the game. So we'll see. I agree. Both teams look pretty good. Heading into Monday night, the Jets did not look that great. Even though they had the full assortment of players to go through. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. They lose, 32 to 19. San Francisco, the shock of the day, a few hours before the game, Christian McCaffrey is ruled out, to the shock of many. Sorry, fantasy players, if you didn't realize that was a possibility and you didn't have a backup plan. If you did, hopefully it was Jordan Mason because he was phenomenal. I think it was RB3 on the week behind Saquon and Joe Mixon. He got all the touches. I believe 28 carries, got a touchdown. Probably won a lot of people their weeks if they had him on the bench with McCaffrey as their handcuff. And so big game for Jordan Mason. Deebo Samuel had a very good game. Kittle and Ayuk start out slow, but that's kind of the story of San Francisco. Similar to the Texans, I think there'll be good games for one, bad games for other kind of thing. Garrett Wilson has a solid, like a mad game, 6 for 60, I believe. Actually, I lost to my pops in our elite league by 1 point because Garrett Wilson couldn't get some more catches, unfortunately. But the Jets, it was okay. It wasn't super exciting. Just glad Aaron Rodgers had a full game back, full game of reps, starting. And then, San Francisco looked better than I thought. I thought they'd be sloppy. Obviously with not having McCaffrey and Ayuk having no training camp, same with Trent Williams. But they looked good and they dominated throughout. And honestly, I think this is like a weird week. Like kickers killed it this week. I mean, Boswell had 6 field goals. Aubrey had, I believe, 4 or 5 field goals. Moody in that game. Blake Groupie, the Saints kicker. Fairbairn had a bunch of field goals. If you have kickers, they were winning your weeks this week. Besides Greg Zuerlein, only got 1 point. But yeah, but to end the week, I think the Niners looked really good. The Jets looked so. But yeah, what do you think? Ooh. Yeah, yeah. We'll see. Week 1 is in the books. Most of it was sloppy, but that is what week 1 is most of the time. So don't overreact and also don't underreact. There's a lot that happened. Hopefully, we got to talk about the guys that you were interested in. We did go through all 16 games, and we're on to week 2. We're going to talk about waivers in our next episode, and then we're going to have our fantasy forecast again, where we'll go through all the games. We'll have starts of the week, kicker of the week, maybe some sits, and obviously, score predictions. So stay tuned for those. And as